Hello everybody, hope you're doing well. Today I'm going to be bringing you another installment of my Modern Classics series, and this time we're going to be discussing Earl Sweatshirt's album I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside. Earl Sweatshirt is a rapper and producer from Chicago and is possibly one of the most unique, creative and articulate contemporary artists going currently. Now the subject of praise I'm providing Earl here is not just my own opinion, of course there's many others' opinions as well, but this is a thing that has been thought of for many years now because Earl has been writing an excellent amount of songs for over a decade now, and not only is that impressive, but the fact that he was also doing this at the very young age of 15 years old, starting basically on the 2009 album Bastard, which was the first release by Tyler the Creator. Both Tyler and Earl cemented a very strong working relationship together, and both were members of Odd Future Wolfgang Kill Them All, which is a rap collective that were very popular in the early 2010s, popular on the internet not just for their very sort of controversial music that they would release, but also the very unique and creative music videos they would release as well. These music videos contained a very warped sense of humour that carried over to Loiter Squad, which was a TV series that Odd Future actually had on the popular nighttime programming station Adult Swim. Now the age of Earl at this time should be really respected and can actually be a case where you can group Earl with a lot of other very young artists and rappers who around this time, such as Soulja Boy, Chief Keef and Lil B, who were not only very popular on the internet but also managed to keep their popularity for a long period of time, not only meaning that it really inspired a lot of up-and-coming rappers who are very sort of similar in the styles of Earl and others nowadays in the present time, but this should also be respected of course too, because especially nowadays any rapper who especially is young and is popular for that sadly is becoming more and more of a trend for them to have a little viral sensation and then suddenly kind of fading into obscurity very quickly. Well, you don't even need to take my word for it. Tyler the Creator himself said in the 2011 interview by Nardwuar that not only did he think that Earl was the best rapper at the age of 16, but 15 years old as well.
Was Earl the best rapper ever at the age of 15, do you think?
He was the best rapper at the age of 16 also.
Like, nobody can compare to him. Nobody.
Not anyone.
And at 16, Earl released his first project called, well, Earl, which is a project that was very similar to what a lot of the Odd Future members were doing at this time, which was having music that was very inspired by the sort of DIY, self-done aesthetics through production and vocal mixing and such, as well as the actual material itself being very shocking and maybe to some offensive, but still with a very macabre sense of humour thrown in too. Around this time as well, Odd Future altogether would release a collective project called Radical, which featured Earl quite a lot of times on here, and every time was always, to me at least, a highlight for the project. Particularly my favourite song, Orange Juice, which sees Earl Sweatshirt and Tyler the Creator jumping on Orange Juice, the very famous instrumental that was originally, of course, done by Gucci Mane. And again, in my opinion, probably in the minority here, but I actually prefer Tyler and Earl's version, for me actually making the song even more energetic and peppy than the original version. But then in just a matter of 3 years, Earl's writing style drastically changed. We would see that there was another release by Odd Future in 2012, but despite just being on one posse cut, Earl was not to be seen on here whatsoever. And we can find that around this time Earl's writing style became a lot more introspective and darker. So in 2013 we all had the pleasure of listening to a fantastic single, Between Villains, which featured Earl Sweatshirt, Flying Lotus and MF Doom. But in that same year we also saw the next project that Earl would release called Doris. This release, which is titled after his grandmother, sees us listening to him talking about family issues and mental health issues and a lot of other darker topics too, which is quite a drastic change compared to what was happening in Odd Future, which was overall quite a lot more goofy and tongue-in-cheek. This may well have alienated fans as well. In fact, I'm sure they were self-aware on this project, given that Vince Staples on the track Burgundy kind of references this and kind of ironically talks about it, but this certainly did not stop Earl from going down the rabbit hole and eventually in 2015 releasing this album, I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside. Now, around the time of Doris, Earl had actually become a bit of a producer himself and produced a few of the tracks on that album, which is seen on this album too, where he's produced the entire thing. This allows him, of course, complete creative control. It also allows him to make the instrumentals match the narrative and the overall emotional experience that you might get when listening to his material. And I think that's very much the case with this album. Now, even though I have the opinion that there are definitely dark sounding tracks that Earl produced on Doris, like the very ominous Guild, for example, I think none of the tracks on that album compares to how harrowing of an experience it could be listening to this album. So the title can be presumed at least to reference how Earl had actually, Nebby's became a bit of a reclusive through Nebby's mental torment or other such matters, but it also can be seen in an interview that he had that around this time he actually torn his meniscus, so he was physically, Nebby's unable to leave his house too. Was it mental issues, physical issues? It could have maybe been both, and if it was combined, that might explain why this is such a down and melancholic record. I mean, the first track, Huey, I would say is the only track that has even the slightest sliver of positivity. This could be through the organ, which kind of sounds a bit warm and inviting, and you can actually hear Earl saying lyrics such as he's providing a toast to his family and friends. However, you can really tell this is all done in a very sarcastic inflection. And then was also the other lyrics that are on this track, such as Earl mentioning that his grandmother had passed away and how he really has a lot of trust issues with the people around him. The instrumental is almost like a shifty disguise that's covering up a very sketchy figure, because even though I said that the organ attempts at least to sound warm and inviting, the low fidelity of it makes it actually come across a bit more unnerving, if anything. After the woman says, we then get into the next track, Mantra, which sees Earl sounding very bitter, talking about how he was emotionally, financially, and mentally at the time of the recording. One topic that stands out to me is how he talks about his relationship turmoils, or the fact that he's getting very irritated with the abundance of fans. But he also sees at the other end of the coin that he needs all of these people because it's what's supporting him financially. The boom and drums soaked in reverb and the almost post-punk sound and guitars come across very nocturnal and would be a great backdrop to someone who's about to have an extremely dangerous drug bender. The sort of bad trip sound can actually be heard in the instrumental because the whole instrumental itself sort of fades in, fades out, and actually slows down and then speeds up, almost like you are actually experiencing a really bad trip. Now for me, even though I do like Huey and Mantra, I think it's the third track, Fawcett, where we actually have this just fantastic lineup of brilliant high quality tracks. I mean, the instrumental for Fawcett is great. It really feels like it was just lifted out of some sort of forgotten noir film, especially with like the sort of gritty guitar and also matched with the sort of haunting and actually in a way beautiful chords over this kind of organ sound and instrument. It does actually feel like it would have suited quite well on, for example, Lynch's Lost Highway. Also heard in this instrumental is actually the sound of running water, which can be linked to the Fawcett. And it does ring a very important bell for me when I think about running water and the idea of just how Earl is facing all of this horrible despair and hopelessness, because I know that an old coping mechanism that I used to hear about when someone was really struggling with mental health is just to wash your face, which I don't know if it's a saying that Earl's heard of before, but to me at least I was told about it and other people were told about it many years ago, and what a bad coping strategy, but was done by a lot of people I know instead of actually getting the real help they need. Earl also talks about running after rabbits, which Nebby's is a link to how Alice in Wonderland chased rabbits, and that story being very dreamy. It's quite actually, a sad thought, because it's almost like Earl has chased his dreams and they just haven't worked for him. In fact, there's a lyric on this song where he says, "When I run, don't chase me," as if he's kind of given a warning to people who want to aspire to be like Earl to just not bother. The next track is the lead single for this album, Grief, and wow, what a haunting track this is. And I could really use the word haunting because the whole instrumental and basically everything else is so caked in reverb. It really feels like the chords that are played in this track are actually being sang by some sort of, spooky, ghostly presence. With this track, Earl basically goes further down and delves into the darkness, talking about, again, his grandmother passing and how he's trying to cope with it through the use of Xanax and alcohol. And what makes the song even darker is this clear sense of paranoia that Earl's experiencing, that he's watching for the snakes in the grass and calling other people around him fishy. He even describes people as leeches as well. And this sort of theme actually matches well with how Earl is delivering these bars as well. He really sells it by sounding really erratic and anxious. This ever-present feeling of paranoia is really felt in the first verse. However, in the second verse, Earl raps in a lot more of a slow down and lethargic manner. The reason for him doing this is maybe because of this substance misuse that he's using as a bad coping strategy, and because of knowing that substance misuse can lead to paranoia. This kind of just feels like for him it would be a horrible vicious cycle. These trust issues actually continue onto the next track, Off Topic, which continues these dark lyrics, very misanthropic, as well as saying how he's getting paranoid even about the cops as well. The beat is of particular note because it's very erratic and how it speeds up at very random intervals, almost like the beat itself is very unstable, much like the rapper who's performing on it. The following two tracks are called Grown Ups and AM Radio, and for me these two tracks in particular have always emotionally resonated with me for the years that I've been listening to this record. For many people who are around Earl's age, this sort of just turning into an adult 18, 19 was for me as well kind of this issue where yes, you're technically an adult, but you also just kind of give these high expectations to yourself. You set them by looking at other people around you and comparing them to yourself, and by doing that you end up just kind of really beating yourself up and assuming that you should be achieving a lot more than you currently are, despite the fact that you're so young and you have plenty of time to actually find your footing. Earl definitely classifies himself as a grown-up in these tracks, and maybe he's doing the things that he feels he should be accomplishing, never mind he's just financially supporting himself, but he's also mentioning that he's actually paying for his mother's rent at the same time. This can be seen also maybe it's because he's feeling like he wants to move past the music that he made in the past, seeing it as maybe juvenile. But then there's a lyric on here where he's saying he doesn't know where he's going and he doesn't know where he's been, which again just kind of feels like what I was mentioning before about people who are still very young and just haven't found their footing yet. Of course, these sort of issues that people experience can really be aided by support from loved ones, which sadly Earl mentions frequently that he doesn't feel like he has them, especially with the very bad emotional connections he has with his father. And he even on this track kind of attempts to seek help from God and fails. And quickly praising Grown Up's instrumental too, which has this guitar that's in vibrato and these really cool, smoky sort of piano chords. It actually, for me, would actually, it would work as a sort of trip-hop instrumental if someone was to actually just sing over this instead of rap. And AM Radio's instrumental is again kind of how I felt with the first track, Huey, how it almost tries to sound confident through its sort of very warm sounding bass. However, it ends up just failing, and because of it failing to sound confident, it just makes the whole thing even more of a depressing experience. The rapper Wiki features on this track, and the way he just kicks this song off with 19 still getting kicked out the crib, I've always just had that line stick with me, because again, I was around this sort of age and was experiencing these sort of feelings that I've just been kind of discussing about, and the way they actually use these samples of kids cheering and going, oh, yeah, it just really sort of sticks with me, all that. This, again, thinking of how you're technically an adult, but you still just have plenty of time of growing up still. Yeah, things aren't looking up for Earl on this track either, talking about how his jaw's twitching and the room spinning. This just really feels like now that the drug use has just became a drug addiction. The track actually has a bit of a jazzy feel, and this jazzy feel continues with the next track, Inside. Yeah, it's called Inside, so I'm assuming it's further relating to this overarching theme of isolation. So a particular lyric that stands out to me on this track is how Earl mentions that he's got a fridge full of spirits, Now, this could be interpreted to mean that Earl literally has a fridge full of alcohol, again relating to his abilities or inabilities to try and cope with his constant sort of mental health issues. But at the same time, I also kind of think it means like ghostly spirits. So with them being in the fridge, it's almost like they're stuck with him inside this household where he's trying to actually secure himself but failing. But following from this DNA, we actually see Earl at his most alert, rapping in almost triplet flows, and this is matched with the sort of skittery percussion. And you remember where I was mentioning before about how a lot of young people, when trying to find their footing, will often compare themselves to other people, which can work against them a lot of the times. Well, the feature on here, Nakel, continues with this theme basically, because Nakel isn't just rapping to anybody, he themes this sort of feature as if he's talking directly to someone, and it seems to be a person who grew up with him, whether a family or a friend, when he was struggling, saying that how this particular person taught him to put hot sauce into some sort of ramen noodles. But he's also saying, now look at me, I've got all these women and girls. It's almost like he's trying to impress people. In fact, I know he is, because he says literally, I haven't got to lie anymore about it. And finally, Earl and Vince Staples finish off this album with the song Wall, and it's a very unnerving ending because there really isn't a conclusion to this. Vince Staples' lyrics kind of just show him attempting to just keep on with the grind, which just makes us feel like, yeah, he's just putting up with God knows what, but he's just continuing, and that's it. It's mainly the same case with Earl, talking about pretty much the same thing. He does say that he has demons, but he just also says to pick your pants up. And for me, this is just a basic different version of saying wash your face, put up with it. And is that a way of going about it? I mean, it might work for some people, it might have worked for Earl, but for many people I highly doubt it. Overall, I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside is a very oppressive and quite daunting sounding record, and just reflects a point in Earl's life which was very, very hard for him, clearly, and the way he delivers it through these very biting lyrics, and covering a lot of grounds and topics for such a short record, by the way this is under half an hour, is both impressive and as well kind of disturbing too. Of course, I've got to give props to Earl for producing this record, and talking before about how the creative control has allowed him to make the instrumental suit the topics. He's done that to a T on here. They're all very, very cold and nocturnal sounding, and suit obviously the topics too. Although a person listening to this may not relate entirely with what Earl is talking about here, especially hopefully not relating to his coping strategies, which Earl warns against himself, I feel overall this record is a very powerful account of a person dealing with some very dark demons, and like I say, represents a certain point in Earl's life which I think in a very interesting way sort of start looking up when he eventually released his follow-up record, Some Rap Songs. I'm aware that I could have talked about the EP Solace, which is equally amazing, that was released the same year. However, I'm just going to stick to this one record and just say that this, in my opinion, is a modern classic. So, thank you very much everybody for watching. I hope you enjoyed this review, and if you haven't listened to this record yet, please, like I say, if this sounded like your sort of thing, check it out. And if you've already listened to it and love the record like I do, then please let us know what you think of my review. So, that's pretty much it. Thanks very much again for watching, and I hope you take care of yourselves. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening.